There you are.
Yes, reporting for duty.
That's good. That is good. All right, so we've got 7-ish minutes. My slides looks I like your painting behind you.
Oh, one of the guys I used to work with me is, I kid him because he would fix the computer and then paint real nice pictures. They said, you're supposed to be left or right brain, not both.
Yeah, yeah. I also do artwork,
Okay.
and yeah. So I do printmaking. But yeah, so I don't know whether I'm left or right brain. Um, Sometimes you have to try and separate the two. But I'm going to just share my slides very quickly, and then I'll stop and let's make sure yours are working.
Okay.
So this will be up when people join us, and I'll walk through what score is, et cetera, et cetera. And let me stop sharing that and let you share. And then so I'll introduce you. Is there any particular way you want me to introduce you?
No, just name an attorney
Okay.
located in Avon.
Okay, good. Yeah, sure. That's perfect. All right, looks like we're good. Just got to get in slide mode and you're there.
Okay. Slideshow.
Yeah, there you go. I guess no, you're not quite in there. So bottom right hand side of your screen, there's a thing that looks like a screen, like
Okay.
a projection screen. Just click on that all the way down.
All the way to the bottom.
Yeah, and right to the left of where your cursor is.
Slideshow.
You
Okay.
got it. Ah, you got it. Okay, perfect. Okay, so if you'll stop sharing, and then
Okay.
I'll reshare mine. I'll open up the how much time have we got? We got 4 more minutes. I'll open up the thing. I'll make some announcements, and then we'll go from there. So just hit stop share.
Okay. I'm still sharing now. Let's see.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I can stop your sharing by hitting yes on the question that just popped up. So why don't I do that? I'll just
Yeah.
hit
Okay.
yes, and you're out of it. Okay. Now I'm going to share again.
Okay.
So are you looking at my Score Cleveland slide?
I am. Yes.
Beautiful. Okay.
And some presentations, they do questions at the end. Some say, I'd like to answer your question along the way and talk about what you want as opposed to my presentation. So do you have a preference?
It's up. I'll leave it up to you. What do you like?
Okay. So yeah, if one of the problems, I can't see the chat though when my screen is being shared. So if you are going to sort of man the chat and say, Pat, we have a question from whatever, I'm more than happy to answer that question, but I can't see the chat. I don't
Okay.
think.
Yeah, no, I'll answer what I can, or I can save them, or if there's any place that you want to just take a breather, just ask if there are any questions. And, if I've
Okay.
got any, I'll read them. If not, no worries.
Okay. Sounds like a good way to do it.
All right, 2 minutes and I'll hit start the webinar. And, it will also be streaming on YouTube, but nobody
Okay.
actually listens that way. We just record them.
Okay. And I did make the same presentation previously, so
Yeah, Anita had told me. Yeah, she
yeah,
said it was well done.
she's kind.
All right, it's 3:59. I'm going to hit start webinar, and
Yeah.
we'll be live, and people will start joining us. I'll watch as people come in. So I just hit the start button. Good afternoon. For those of you who are just joining us, welcome to our afternoon seminar. We're going to wait another minute or so, and then we will get started. So I have 4 o'clock. Let's give it another 30 seconds or so. I
Okay.
appreciate everybody joining us. Okay, it's 4:01. I think we'll get started. I know people may join us as we go through this, but the first part of this is going to be a little bit about SCORE. I want to welcome you here today, this afternoon. My name is Bob Cohen, and I am a SCORE mentor. I work with the Cleveland chapter of SCORE. What I'd like to do just for 2, 3, 4 minutes is kind of just walk you through a little bit about SCORE Cleveland and what we do and who we are, for those of you who may not be familiar with it. So let me do that. Just so you know, we're the largest network of volunteer mentors for small businesses probably in the country. There are 240 chapters of SCORE throughout the country, including this one here in Cleveland. And there are probably some 10,000 volunteers throughout the country. Here in Cleveland, we've got 90 volunteers. And I say volunteers, we are an all volunteer organization. Even the regional people and all the way up to the national folks. So we have a few in our national office that actually get paid, but other than that, we are all volunteers. So we appreciate you being here, and it's just a matter of a lot of business people wanting to give back just for a lot of various reasons. So let me talk a little bit more about SCORE. Our real mission here is to foster small businesses and help develop thriving communities of business owners in and around Cleveland. And you'll see in a few minutes, we are in 7 counties across Lake Erie in the Cleveland area. And probably the majority of our clients are located here in Cuyahoga County, which is where I live. We, as I said, are all volunteers. Many of us are retired. The acronym SCORE is Service Corps of Retired Executives, but that's kind of a misnomer at this moment in time because we have a lot of people that are still in the employment realm and are working and bring expertise to some of us older people that have retired. We certainly learn a lot about what's going on now in business from the people that are still working. So it's really a nice way to do it. But for all intents and purposes, most of our mentors have had really good careers and are in the process of giving back, but they also have wonderful experience. So with our 90 volunteers in the Cleveland area, there isn't much that we can't cover in the way of needs for small businesses. And you know, small businesses are critical to the economy of the United States. So just a quick thing, in last year, 22, SCORE was chapter of the year, but we, more importantly, started somewhere around 500 businesses and created just over 800 jobs. And that's being tracked by Price Waterhouse. They look at that on an annual basis so that we know what our success rates are. And you can see that we provide a lot of resources to people through our chapter services. So I mentioned the 7 counties. These are those on the bottom in green. And, you know, we're pretty much everywhere right now. The nice thing about what we do is most of it's virtual, and so we can bring in an expert from almost anywhere to work with our clients. And the way this works is, I'll get to that in a second, but I did want to let you know at this point in time, all is free. So again, in part, we are funded by the SBA through the federal government, just a little bit of what we get, and then the rest we raise on our own. We've got a fundraising committee, and we work diligently to keep our doors open every year, raising our own funding. So before I get into how to get a mentor and why to get a mentor and so on, and show you some resources, just want to let you know that if you're a SCORE client on this call, you are invited to our SCORE Cleveland Connect 2023, and it's a networking event that's happening, as you can see, on September 12th from 5:30 to 7:30. It's at the Holiday Inn in Independence, and if you go to our website and hit any of these things, it'll take you through. But bottom line is that we've set it up so that people have an opportunity to network. Small businesses, our clients will be there having the ability to talk with all the people that are in the room. We will be serving hors d'oeuvres, so food will be there. We'll also have a cash bar, so that wine and beer, I believe, is what we're going to be serving. That's available as well. So it should be a nice evening. You get a chance and you want to get into it, please go to our website, which I'm about to show you. So I'm going to hit a live link to our website real quick and show you kind of how it lays out. So here is what I just talked about with Cleveland SCORE Connect. And I just want to let you know that we have a chat feature on our website. It is staffed probably 3 out of the 7 days a week, or maybe it's 4 out of the 7 days a week. And if it's not staffed, there is a chat bot that you can work with. But we do have live people staffing this so that you can go on and ask specific questions and get answers right away. So what I wanted to show you, if you get a chance, just go into the Cleveland Connect, and if you're interested in joining us that night, just go ahead and fill out that application form. It's not a big deal, and you'll get in there. I just wanted to talk to you about finding a mentor, because when we do these workshops, a lot of times what will happen is it'll spark enough interest in our clients, our prospective clients, that they're going to want to talk to a mentor. So in order to do that, there's a couple different ways you can do that. We have our profiles online. You can actually look nationally. Right now, I'm on score.org/Cleveland, and that's the Cleveland site. But if you went to score.org, you can look at profiles on a national level to find people that are you can work directly with that way. But typically, if you're interested in a mentor, you would hit request local mentor, and you just begin filling in your own information. As you can see here, there are some slots to fill in. And if you could describe to us what it is that you're looking for, our client intake coordinators will try to match you up with a mentor in the Cleveland area that matches the criteria of what you're looking for your business. As you know, we work with startup businesses. We work with businesses that are already established. We work with businesses that are actually beginning to sell or close out. We are here for the life of your business. And we always say that nobody should have to go it alone. So, if you're interested at all in working with a mentor for any reason, please go online and do that. So, I am going to let me go back to this. Let me go to my last slide. I mentioned our services were free, and so feel free to go out there, take a look. There are some excellent resources on the SCORE website as well. Those resources include things like business plan templates, financial templates, also workshops, recorded workshops. If you want to go in there and just type in what you're looking for, you'll see a whole raft of potential that you can look at from blogs all the way through actual recorded webinars to live webinars that are coming up as well. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm going to stop sharing, and Pat is going to start sharing his screen. So as we go through this, I will monitor the chat. If you have any questions, please feel free to put it into the chat or Q&A. I'll try and watch both. I will, if there's something really that's applicable to a portion of what Pat's talking about, I may ask him to answer that question, but we'll probably hold most of it toward the end. I may write some answers back to you if it's just chat or, a simple question that I can answer. I'm not an attorney, but Pat is. And so Pat has done other presentations with us, as well as other people from the Truex Law Group. They are fabulous for small business. I would, tell you to listen closely to what they've got to say and what Pat has to say. I think you'll be very interested in things that are applicable to your small businesses. So without further ado, Pat, why don't you jump in? I'm going to go off screen for a little while, and I'll jump back on in a little while, and I'll monitor the chat.
All right.
All you need to do is go ahead and hit the slide mode at the bottom of your screen, lower right.
Lower right.
Yeah, where we did before, just at the very bottom of your screen on the right. And that little screen.
Yeah, for slideshow.
Yeah. Bear with us, folks. We'll be up and running in a second. There you go. You got it.
Okay, great. All right. Hello and welcome this afternoon. My main goal for today is to answer questions that you might have. So we prepared slides and presentation. We can go through that. But as Bob mentioned through the chat, if there's questions that you have that you want to get answered, we'll want to do that today. And again, a lot of people with business, there's no dumb questions, as they say. And so feel free to ask what it is you might be curious about. So at this point, just a quick background on myself. I'm an attorney, became attorney in 1990, and have 4 children, 4 grandchildren. And I started out teaching high school at St. Ignatius right out of college. And then I was the lawyer for Catholic Charities, 21 corporations for about just under 10 years. And then after that, I did 17 years of $1 million philanthropy. I worked with the clinic, John Carroll, to name a few, structuring $1 million gifts that named their wings and pavilions. So visit with the people that had the great surgeries or that were alumni who wanted to make a gift. And a lot of times they wanted to make the gift anyway, but there were tax implications. And so work with them on that. And then at this point, working with Truex Law, it does a lot of business legal work. There's some construction clients, quite a lot of business succession and estate planning that goes along with it. And so quite a lot of buying and selling of businesses, buying and selling buildings. But we do quite a lot of presentations. So for a company to get your contracts in order, risk management, how to reduce legal liability, things like that. So just a little bit about myself. Want to jump in, and the title is, 10 mistakes that small businesses make. First slide I want to talk about is not making the deal clear with co-founders. Frequently, businesses are started up, someone has an idea or a group have an idea, and then they decide, let's go ahead with this, let's launch something. But to start off with, how are we going to get it going? And I've had business setups where someone is going to do time, someone else is going to do cash. I've had ones where the dad was going to give property, and then the son was going to do all the work and put in lots of sweat equity, whatever. So sometimes there's donations of different types, but it's a little hard to quantify sometimes the sweat equity as an example. And so it's real important right from the start to have the more clarity, the better, so that if at any point someone passes, someone wants to sell, someone wants to move to Florida, whatever, there isn't confusion as to who owns what portion of the business, that kind of stuff. So a lot of people start off with a lot of verbal, and not much written. And so then to shift that weight as quickly as you can into literally writing down the expectations, the understandings, and sometimes it's perceived that there's a meeting of the minds, but there isn't. And then also sometimes the heirs, the spouse, children, etc., end up coming into the picture where you had a perfect understanding with the person, but if they passed, then you're dealing with a whole new situation. So write down as much as you can is my advice. Right? When you have an LLC, they're called membership interests or units. And then when you have a corporation, they're called shares. And then sometimes there's classes where class A shares and B shares. And so again, sometimes the A is the person that gave the cash, and the B then are the worker bees of the company. So just to understand that particular language, are you working with shares? Are you working with membership interests? So how will the equity be split? Sometimes the company makes money the first year, doing well, and one partner or one shareholder says, great, you take half, I'll take half. This has been a great year. And the other one said, well, wait a minute, I thought we were going to reinvest it all into the company. We could grow this thing if we bought another unit or whatever the case might be. So before you get to that point, it's better back to having things written down, having an understanding. What happens if you lose money? What happens if you make money? The more you have that understanding, the better. And then can you leave? There are situations where someone is looking for a commitment from the other person they're going into business with. And sometimes it's a 1 year, sometimes it's a 3 year, somewhere it's a 5 year. I've seen documents that write in neither partner may leave the company within an X number of years. So this kind of stuff you might not think of on day one. And if it's with a friend or a cousin or your brother-in-law, you're starting a business. But the whole idea of, is this something that you can understand what are the different parameters and who owns what and what shares, what you do with the money, all that kind of stuff. So time commitments is another one. Someone sometimes is looking for a very short time frame, a quick couple of years. This is fun. Others say, no, I intend to retire off of this. I really need a bigger commitment. Sometimes a buyer shows up out of the blue that wasn't expected. And then you ask, what if the business were to be sold? What would you do with money and how much and who gets what? So all these are factors that aren't unforeseeable. You may not foresee them at this point in time, but once you do this for a few years, you start to see all sorts of scenarios. And we have had buyers offering a lot of money show up at the door with two people that didn't expect to sell for 15 more years. But then sometimes the deal was too good to be true, or sometimes it was a really good deal. So you just want to be prepared for whatever may come. All right. Mistake number 2 is not selecting the best business structure. So sometimes people get confused saying that, we're an S Corp or we're an LLC. So they're basically, the IRS has a way in which it looks at your company, and that is your tax status. So you can be a sole proprietor or a partnership, LLC, C Corp, S Corp. So there's a number of ways in which you do your taxes, but then there's how Ohio looks at you. So you can be Ohio company, but you can be Ohio not-for-profit. You can be Ohio for-profit company. And then some do LLC, some do corporations. So, and then again, there's nonprofits. So understand the two different angles. Your tax status isn't contradictory. It's two different things with your the way the state views you as a company. So we talked about sole proprietor. Some people get started, but then there's liability, and then they want to limit their liability. So thus the name comes a limited liability company. In that limited liability company, then the members aren't liable for the actions of the company. There's frequently insurance, there's frequently indemnity that says the company will protect anybody that gets accused of doing something wrong, etc. You frequently can have many members, but there generally need to be rules of who's going to be the managing member. And sometimes there'll be two managing members. Either one has the authority to bind, sign contracts, that kind of stuff. sometimes only one. So the LLC is one of the more popular when someone's starting up a business. That's how most Ohio businesses get started. So talked about the different tax status, S Corp, C Corps. And then there's just partnerships where you share the profits and the losses. And then the concept, sometimes there's a limited partner who has zero liability, but just invests in the company. And then there are managing partners who work more day to day, and the managing partner has more responsibility. Bob, any chats, questions at this point?
No, Phil, so far clear.
Okay, great. We'll go on. Mistake number 3.
I'm sorry.
Sure. No problem. Not having a thorough rules document. So in Ohio, it's not required that a limited liability company, LLC, has an operating agreement, but generally it's a real good idea. And then frequently, if you go for a loan, you're entering into a large contract with another company, they'll want to see that. And then sometimes people say we don't have one, but and sometimes they'll say you're going to need one in order to qualify for the loan or for to contract with us. And with the operating agreement, it's like bylaws for a corporation or code of regulations for a nonprofit. It's your rules. So who are the officers, who votes, who has authority, who can sign checks, all that kind of stuff. So it's a real good idea to have an operating agreement. They're simpler when it's a one-member LLC and one person owns it all. And then it gets a little more complicated with multiple members. And again, you frequently have like exhibit at the end of who's contributed what to the company, who owns how many member units, that kind of stuff. In the corporation then, again, who has shares. So many times the shareholders don't make the decisions on how to run the company. And so if I own IBM stock, I wouldn't have any say in how they run the company today. So even small businesses can be similar to that. You can have shareholders who don't have power in making decisions running the company, other than the annual voting rights given within the document. All right. So it's important to understand then as you're starting the company or as you proceed, what's your quorum percentage to pass a motion? If you're going to amend the bylaws, how many people have to be present to create a quorum? And then say once you have a quorum, how many people does it take to pass that motion, et cetera. So having the thorough rules prevents confusion and arguments and disagreements on how company business should be transacted. Do you want officers? Some have, just one person is multiple officers. You could be the president and the secretary, and be the vice president and the treasurer, et cetera. So you don't have to have separate positions, but many times there are certain understandings of who is the person that is responsible to take minutes of the meetings, who's the person that's responsible to do financial reports at meetings if you have them, et cetera. How long are their terms? What happens if it's resignation? Sometimes you fill their old slot. Sometimes the new person has a brand new set of years. So it depends. You can make it however you'd like it to go. Some have like executive committees as example, where they have authority and can make action. Many companies, the executive committee then reports back to the board, who must ratify whatever the executive committee decided it was going to do. So they say there's no one answer. It's just, how do you want to run the company? There are some with one trustee on a board of directors. There are others that when I was with Catholic Charities, the foundation had 110 board members, and they gave them all 15 names to go ask their friends for donations to Catholic Charities. So it all depends on the purpose, your mission, what you're trying to accomplish. But some large boards can be unwieldy, and some boards don't have enough expertise. Sometimes you want an accountant or an attorney or different roles covered by the board members, so that you get expertise in the different areas the company needs to get advice on. Some have committees where there's voting and non-voting members. And so again, say you had expertise from in a facilities corporation or facilities unit within a corporation. You might have the janitor at a nonprofit, on the board, but whether voting or non-voting. So there's a number of ways in which you can set it up, but it's real good to have a thorough understanding so that you operate smoothly. Corporate record book is another piece where many codes say that you need to have an annual meeting, and that's when you vote for the officers, and an annual report is done on the financial situation, for example, things like that. But many times people get busy and they forget to start a corporate record book. They don't have the articles that they filed with the Secretary of State. They don't have their tax ID number. They don't have their member unit share certificates or their share certificates. So corporate record books many times get sort of forgotten along the way. And so it's sometimes helpful when you have one of the board members who's a bit of a stickler, who reminds you that, hey, I think we're supposed to have that annual meeting, and I think we're supposed to do a vote on the officers and terms and things like that. So it can be real helpful to have someone who helps to get back to the way things are intended to be operated. All right, mistake number 4, not taking your employee HR matters seriously. The human capital is now a buzz phrase being used instead of calling it human resources, but I think we all know what it means. Many times it's a very high percentage of the budget of a company, and it has a strong effect. Who comes, goes. It's very expensive to lose employees and hire and interview and train, that kind of stuff. So if you can avoid excessive costs in human resources, there's going to be a cost as it is, but you don't need to make it any costlier. So what expense, there is liability, many times there are lawsuits from employees and not being paid overtime and not fairly giving them the say paternity leave or maternity leave, if that's in the record, in the handbook, the employee handbook. So having a well-written employee handbook is important. The documentation, the first day on the job, many times an I-9 form is signed and it's required, and then places put it in a file and forget it and lose and throw it away and never have it. You need to have that on file. With workers' comp, you have certain reports you're going to have to do. With payroll, they're going to be the tax forms at the end of your W-2s. There are immigration issues that come up. So a lot of times the HR paperwork can be almost an afterthought, and sometimes someone will start and they intend to get around to it, but a couple months go by and they haven't completed. They have like an onboarding checklist, something like that. Background checks are huge these days. There's considerable liability if you don't do a background check on someone, and then a simple background check would have shown that you knew or should have known that this person had a background that wasn't appropriate. So you definitely want to have your background check, keep that paperwork to be able to demonstrate that you were appropriate in your screening, in the hiring, who you're bringing into the workplace, and then whatever actions they do while they're working for you. So in the employee handbook, parity, consistency, I mentioned sort of maternity, paternity. Nowadays, there are companies being sued if they offer the maternity but not paternity. Many go to family using the word so that they can avoid having to parse, down a couple layers. Some handbooks say that we will do annual reviews, and then they do or don't. And so that can be like another example of a problem. Many have tried to simplify it as much as possible. Do you know what's expected of you? Do you have all the materials you need to do the job? Is there any door I can open for you? And some have, that's simple, that they're really just trying to have a meeting of the minds, that the person understands what's expected and they can do their job. Benefits obviously can be very costly, and you can lose employees if you don't offer certain benefits. And again, but they can be very expensive. And healthcare, are you part of a large pool? Are you part of a small pool? That can affect the costs. Do you have a 401k program? Retirement contributions, there are different types where the employees own a part of the company little by little. There ESOP, you might hear, employee savings plans, that kind of thing. With PTO, sick, and vacation, that's an area that frequently gets trouble. Many places have stopped using sick and vacation as categories and have lumped everything into PTO. And then they try to reduce it to hours. So you don't have to call in coughing and pretending like you're sick. It doesn't matter. It's PTO, it's your hours, use them as you wish. Others still will break down holiday, sick, vacation, and then, sometimes though explaining what sick means, and somebody saw the person who's homesick at Target that day, whatever. So how are you going to handle that, those scenarios? So to say PTO is seems to be being used more and more, where you really don't have to parse what was going on during that time. You just have so many hours where you don't have to be at work, and you go from there. Lately, work remote has been a big problem for many companies. Some have saved a lot of money by having employees work remote. There was an article in our local paper that Progressive didn't need all the space because it was working so well with people working remote. Then there was an article I read yesterday that Amazon CEO said people better get back to work or they're going to lose their jobs. So some let them work 1 day a week, floating, that kind of stuff. But it's an issue, and it can lose you employees if you don't have any work remote. So some job seekers are looking for fully remote. So to make a decision how you're going to and write up a policy, don't just have it be as it comes up. One employee gets one thing, one employee gets another. They live close, they live far, they have children, they don't have children. So termination is another one. And so again, termination, they can terminate themselves by giving their resignation letters. All it means is the employee leaving. You can terminate them on your own accord. The two different types of employees, the at will means any time. Then there's the contractual employee. And so you would have to pay them, say if you had a 1-year contract and you wanted to remove them, not for cause, halfway through the year, you still would pay the other half of the contract if you're bound as the company. So it helps to have the contract with employees that you really want to stay and are real important to the company. All right. Mistake number 5, not having a succession plan. And so if you just ask, and people love to kid attorneys about the parade of horribles and what if, but what will happen if there's no succession plan? In the legal world, in your buy-sell agreements, they frequently talk about the 5 Ds. So if you have 3 partners, just say, and one of them dies, what will happen? Some companies haven't done a succession plan, and the shares of the one partner go to the spouse, and all of a sudden the spouse is a partner in the company, and the other 2 partners, we wouldn't have wanted that, and we didn't intend that to happen, etc. But if you haven't made any plan, you then have the ability where you could have a partner in your company who you weren't expecting and really don't want, and on the 3rd day there, they can decide that we should be making $1 million decision to do something, cancel a lease, whatever. So it's a really good idea to cover that. What would happen if death? Disability, sometimes you're presuming the person's going to be able to work and they're an important part of the workforce of the company, and they're just not physically able to do it anymore, but they still own shares, they haven't died. So there are some companies that will also buy disability insurance. But again, frequently the attorneys start with just picture it happening. What would you do? What would you like to happen? And then you can make paperwork to protect that ends up being what happens. And then again, many times a divorce occurs. Nobody thought about it. Nobody anticipated it. Yet here you are. And then in the divorce, does the spouse get half the shares that that person has in the company, et cetera? So that can be accounted for. And then departure, some key people leave, and again, and then some steal money or aren't working very hard. So sometimes it's voluntary, sometimes it's not, but to plan for that. What would happen if one of the 3 partners who currently is, say doing a significant amount of work that the company's relying upon, what if they were to depart? All right. And then there's disagreement. And as I mentioned before, there are situations where someone wants to reinvest the money, someone wants to take all the money out of the company. And so it's real important to have the rules so that there isn't a situation where partners become, strongly at odds. Buy-sell agreements are real helpful and important, and valuation is the first step. So if you're going to, sell a house, you basically want to know what it's worth. So with a company, there are many companies doing quite well, making millions of dollars, who have no idea of what they're actually worth. So there are companies that will, and many of them are the accounting firms, et cetera. There's independent companies, but to do a valuation of what really is the value. And then you have different pieces that you might not have thought of, or someone might be overvaluing the land you're on or overvaluing your goodwill name, that kind of thing. So it's a good idea, and many companies have it written in their code that every 2 years a business valuation will be conducted, or every 5 years or something like that. But so many times insurance is used in buy-sell agreements. And if one of the partners were to die, the company has bought the insurance. The company is the beneficiary. They receive that insurance money. They then hand that over to the heirs of the person that died and buy them out. And so then the company now owns the shares from that partner who passed away. So many companies would benefit from a buy-sell agreement. Insurance is very helpful to make sure there's the cash when the time comes to buy out that person. Right. And then many have closed corporation agreements who you can sell your shares to. So many times there's a first right of refusal type of situation, but do the shares stay within the partners, within the company? Many times they have the company's ability to buy out. Then whoever owns the most shares has the second option to buy out, and so forth. So closed corporation agreements keep you from being able to sell to someone that the other partners wouldn't be pleased to have as shareholders of the company. All right, so you don't want unintended business partners, basically. All right, mistake number 6, not having a handle on your insurance and your indemnification. So in indemnification agreements, you frequently see, as for example, if you were to sell a company, I will indemnify the buyer from everything that happened up until closing. And then the buyer will say, I'll indemnify the seller from everything that happened after the closing, since that new person took over. And so, that can be, you do want clarity on who's being indemnified. Is it the seller? Is it the business has protection as well? So someone may not sue the seller human, but what about the company name that did the job that is in question now? So it's real important to have insurance, obviously, and then we don't need an insurance lesson here, and too complicated, but just some of the different types of insurance that can come into play that can help out. So errors and omissions, some will colloquially call it malpractice insurance, but many times there's you're going to want $1 million to $10 million in protection in case there is some type of major error, depending on what your business is and how much is at risk. General liability is someone might sue you saying something was done wrong. And so, and again, depending on what kind of company you are, you can understand what types of risks there might be. I've had clients who have vehicles, some of them are construction, a $50,000 vehicle, no insurance whatsoever on that vehicle. And so to ask, simply put, can you take that kind of hit? If lightning, use your imagination, fire, et cetera, it was stored inside a barn kind of thing. So are your vehicles also protected? How many trucks and all that? Some of those vehicles are very valuable. Key employees many times can be taken for granted. But sometimes there's like a COO person who's been managing things well, company's humming along. And if that person were to die or were to just leave, get a new job. So companies can get insurance that covers the cost. And sometimes it's like, say, 2 years of the salary of what was that key employee, knowing that the company is going to have a little lull while they post and interview and hire and train the person who would take that position. So there's key employee insurance that can be purchased. Renters, owners, And again, sometimes is a lease. Do you own the property? The tri-net lease you frequently will hear used means that the lessee who is leasing the property has to pay all the insurance and all the utilities, things like that. So the owners frequently pass on to renters some of the insurance requirements or liability risk. Indemnity agreements are frequently part of any type of business deal. And sometimes, again, between partners, they do that as well. Home harmless, waivers of liability. Sometimes these words are used interchangeably, but basically you're saying who would be protected from any mishap that from the business day to day that the company is conducting. All right. And good. Any questions in the chat, Bob? Are we good?
We are good. I just have one question I wanted to throw at you.
Sure.
You may want to cover it later. You may already intend to cover it, but that is understanding the difference between let's say, a contractor versus an employee. Somebody that would get a 1099 versus somebody that would get a W-4.
Yes. So there are rules as to which the person is. And so sometimes companies get in trouble for fudging that aspect and trying to create a 1099 where the person's clearly an employee and then vice versa. So they're, to walk through criteria of control. Is this person supervising other people? Are they required to do the job the way you as the company dictate? Or are they have leeway in the way in which they conduct the business that they're going to do? So it is important to differentiate. And it isn't just, we'll decide to make them a 1099 or we'll decide to make them an employee. It really is based on the factors of how the person will do their work, what's their responsibility, do they have budget, do they have authority, do they supervise, those kind of things. So hope that answers the question. Whoever that was, feel free to ask a follow-up if I didn't cover what you were looking for.
No, I do have one other though. Are there mistakes that solopreneurs in digital service businesses make that are more traditional, brick and mortar business owners make? Are there differences between the kinds of mistakes that people do make?
So companies with more brick and mortar and companies that are more digital, as I understand that, yes. And so there is, risk and liability with both, and yet, they're very different. And so there's quite a number of law firms that are IP divisions that are making quite a lot of money trying to make sense out of contracts, who owns something. There are situations where the employee handbook says that all of your work product while you're doing your digital work for the company belongs to the company. And then the person leaves, may want to start a company using that because they're all excited about that digital content they've created. So having clear rules about who owns what when you're producing, it's very important to have clarity. So with the brick and mortar, then there frequently are more liabilities and you get your slip and fall kind of things, et cetera. But in the digital world, you do have hackers. There's that kind of liability. And again, clarity as to who owns the content. So there are differences between the digital companies versus the more brick and mortar companies. Right. All right, moving on then to mistake number 7, not having clear policies and procedures. So remote work, and again, I had a situation where they allowed one employee to work remotely and the other one didn't. That is okay if you have a reason. So if, for example, the one needs to is, say you're the IT person that's to fix everybody's computers and you're not able to do it remotely, as opposed to, and maybe that's a bad example, but there are certain positions where you do need to be there for the position, but there are some other positions that can be done fully remote. So you generally don't want to have disparity, but there could be situations where it's more job to job. but it'd be real wise to have clear policies in the handbook. And so whether some have them apply to their manager, whether they can, et cetera, but some companies have nothing written and the issue arises and I don't know, what do we do here? So you can think through these types of scenarios and, would you want that to occur? I mentioned some companies are saving money by having remote work. Others are doing everything they can to try to bring people back in as much as they can. So, and then some have just settled on hybrid. So there's a number of ways to do it, but you don't want to get accused of a disparity and giving favoritism, that kind of stuff. The equal rights EEOC claims, and there's protected classes many of us are very familiar with, but you do want to keep them in mind. And so just using an example, I'll joke, Bob at the beginning talked about who the executives were that are willing to help. And so is over 40 old, is over 50 old, over 60 old, et cetera. But according to the equal rights, it's 40 is the criteria. So there's make sure you're aware of that and not, quite a number of HR complaints or lawsuits still fall into those EEOC classes. Harassment is something that is, again, more and more the handbooks are covering in more detail. And then some will have a sexual harassment policy, but there are other types of harassment as well. And there have been companies and belittling occurred and bullying and things like that. So weapons, there's, laws are changing all across the country, which states allow them, which ones don't, which ones need a license, all that kind of stuff. So to have, it wouldn't be unforeseen that you might be questioned on what your policy is on the topic. So it's worth thinking about and answering that so that you're not caught off guard. I already mentioned, pregnancy leave. So are you going to offer maternity or paternity? Do you get the same leave if you adopt? That kind of stuff. So just be clear is all I probably need to say there. Many were caught off guard with COVID policies. As an example, there was an article last week that I saw that the newer strain has come back, and many of the colleges, as the students are going back to college, they're reinstituting mask mandates, things like that. You hear certain people say, oh, good God, are we going back to that again? Tell me we're not. So what is your policy? So then I have a relative that was saying just a couple of days ago, someone tested positive at their work. They're in a 13-person area that's pretty close quarters. And so they said, wait, do we go home? Wait, do we have to sequester? Wait, do we? So what is the policy? What would you do? It's real important that you don't be accused of having an arbitrary response. Non-compete agreements, there are, and some politicians have proffered that these kind of go away, that they don't think they're helpful to working society, but there are some businesses that have trade secrets, that have important information that do need to be kept confidential. So you sign non-disclosure agreements, non-compete agreements, and so you would have to have a reason. If you just arbitrarily put in that, everyone must sign a non-compete agreement and there's really no point to it, it can be nullified. So you want to identify what is it you need protection from as a company, and then you put in those types of agreements. There are some companies that, just all of a sudden realize that we are developing quite a lot of confidential business practices. And so then just all of a sudden they'll have everyone in the company sign an agreement that they won't divulge that information, et cetera. So it's never too late to start if there's a business value to that. With reimbursements always are interesting within a company, and what do you pay for, and some what's submitted and what's accepted. And some employees have actually sued the company because they wouldn't reimburse an expense that, and the handbook said just and reasonable as part of your job. The employee thinks it is, the company thinks it isn't. So the more clarity to your policy again. Bereavement is another issue that comes into play. All of a sudden, you're in an important time of the year and someone's grandma dies in California. Are they going to be gone for 5 days? Is it all paid? Again, if say it's not grandma, but it's aunt, but she acted like a grandma, those kind of things. So a strong bereavement policy of what you're willing to pay, what you're not willing to pay, which relatives are included. Some require that an obituary be submitted. Some ask for the funeral booklet, believe it or not. So there's different ways companies have tried to get a handle on how they'll conduct that policy. There are laws that some companies don't want the employees discussing their rate of pay and think that'll cause a problem. Some companies are paying more to new employees in order to bring them in, and the employees that have been there and faithful get hurt if they find out that they're being paid less. So you're not allowed to restrict your employees from discussing pay generally, but you can restrict it from on the premises. And so you're saying they're supposed to be doing their job, not talking about their pay while on the job. So that's a nuance that many companies ask. I get to ask that question frequently. Can we have them sign an agreement they can't discuss their pay? So again, the answer offsite and onsite are two different answers to that question. All right, mistake number 8. I talked about not knowing what your business is worth. If someone were to offer you or offer one of your partners to buy out their share, say you had multiple partners, you had members with different opinions of what it's worth, et cetera. So how would you come to the amount of the worth of your shares or your member units, et cetera? Some companies want to bring in new members. Some have them pay because they need cash. They'll bring in a member with cash. Sometimes it's a partner who makes decisions. Sometimes it's a limited partner. But to have those rules, normally in your code of regulations, your bylaws, your operation agreements, if you're an LLC, can you bring in new investors? Can you bring in new partners? Can you bring in new shareholders? It's sometimes one wants to, another member doesn't. So how would that be settled? When you value all the assets, and frequently they break it into real property, often can be appraised, and you can get to a pretty good understanding of what the property's worth. But sometimes you get to the point of using it, what it currently is being used for, or its best use can be a very different number. You have your tangible versus your intangible. So sometimes the companies get bought and all they want is their name and their brand, not necessarily the product. Sometimes it's exact. We want the product. We want to put our name and our brand around that product. So that whole idea of the assets and their value and who's buying what. Sometimes you want to sell the business and people get confused. The stock deal is when you buy the whole company. And then the asset deal is you're buying certain assets within the company, but not the whole company. And so and oftentimes the liabilities is an example of what the asset deal wants to buy and leave the liabilities behind, where the stock deal, you get all the good and the bad, the whole company all at once. So when you go to do the buying and selling of a company, it's important to understand, and there's tax consequences for each. So it's well worth talking to your professional, your accountant, CPA, which would be best for you. All right, poor handling of your data, your e-data, is it paper? Some companies scan everything and have a no paper rule. They try to have as little paper as possible. Others have a idea where they have to keep both, and then they, which is easier to find. Can you sort easier electronically to find, get your hand on that document that you're looking for? But bank documents, people talk about the IRS, how long do we need to keep our tax returns, that kind of stuff. If there were older lawsuits, investors, what they paid when they came in, do you have the old records? Do you have the old shares? So subpoenas, it's sometimes they'll subpoena your, every document relating to a certain topic, and the company looks like, oh my goodness, how do we go back and find all that? So sometimes it's very easy electronically, but not through paper. Other times they have, the paper file and they simply send it over in a big copy box. So it is important to think about how you handle your data, what's important, what you'll need to put your fingers on at what point in time. I've had a number of afternoons where I'm just doing my little legal work in my little office and I'll get a frantic call. Hey, the bank needs my operating agreement right away. I can't find it anywhere. Could you send it over to them? And so an example of, you do want to be able to get your fingers on the important documents when the time comes for whatever reason. So as I say, the corporate record book is another thing that are you having the annual meetings? Is somebody taking minutes? Do you have a resolution when you make a decision and you vote on it, that kind of stuff? So it helps to have, sort of crisp corporate practices or business practices. Some are using software license with never thinking, hey, do we have the right, or did that license expire a couple of years ago when we're still using the license, the software without the legal license, et cetera. And then what data do you want to protect in what way? There's so many companies that have had cyber attacks in the last 10 years. And so some will firewall between certain pieces of data that need to be used every day on the company system, and then others that get archived. And you think of it like a cyber safe that isn't available readily into protection from if there were to be some type of cyber attack. Then confidentiality, who has access to it? Is it just a file cabinet in the corner that anybody can go look at whenever they want? Employee files, you want confidential. You don't want other people going through their coworkers' HR files, like an example. So who has access? Is it just the HR person and their assistant? Is it 10 people in an HR department? So even breaking down who has password access to whatever information. So it is important to parse your information and think about how you'll store it, who has access, are you keeping it confidential, etc. All right. I mentioned remote work. Are there firewalls? Is their computer at home protected? Are they using a company laptop, when they go home that has the protection, or are they just using their home laptop and who knows what type of protection they have, McAfee or one of those, Norton or something, but do they or don't? So many companies provide a laptop to put the security on it to make sure that they're covered. All right. And then mistake number 10, not using your professionals, not a commercial for attorneys, but as a joke. There had a situation recently with a client who was selling a property, and the realtor said, you don't need an attorney, this is pretty straightforward. They said, you really don't need to involve attorneys. Well, the person needed an easement for parking, and it said in the purchase agreement that there'd be an easement for parking, but the realtor never handled it. Purchase agreement was signed and no mention of an easement, which would drastically affect the way they could use the property. Just a little example where so now there's a lawsuit and thousands of dollars have been spent on both sides on attorneys trying to settle the property and its use and who has an easement, that kind of thing. So to have someone take a quick look at it and tell you it's okay, many times, there's a little piece that might help you. Oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, I didn't see that. So, you have a number of them. The longer you practice, the number of stories that you have of someone who thought they'd not have something looked at and then didn't understand a paragraph that's in there or what they were agreeing to, that kind of thing. So taxes is another piece. I've seen situations where they didn't ask a CPA to take a look at something, and considerable dollars were lost paying in taxes that could have easily been saved if they just would have tweaked how they did the document or did the deal that was present. One little incident can cause, or an event can cause, significant harm to a business. And so the insurance agent can be very important, the CPA, the attorneys. Sometimes cutting the corner can be costly. So just a warning there. So they asked the question, do you have insurance coverage for a pandemic? One of the funny things that popped up was that many of the companies didn't have pandemic business interruption insurance. So they had a business policy and it covered a whole bunch of things, and sometimes even like earthquake. But a pandemic hit. Many of them, when they signed up, didn't think about it, or even if they were asked, laughed and said, "What are the odds?" So they didn't have pandemic coverage, and then they didn't benefit from business interruption insurance. Some had pandemic coverage and actually received insurance money. There was the riot downtown Cleveland, and a whole bunch of windows were broken a few years back. People don't realize that plate glass is frequently a separate item in the insurance policy. And so a number of the businesses didn't have plate glass. Then they were astounded how much it cost to replace the plate glass. So what a negative for Cleveland, many of the companies years later still haven't fully replaced all the glass that was broken that day. And there's some are doing the front of the building, and then next year they're going to do the side of the building, that kind of stuff. But the plate glass is a separate coverage and very expensive. And that was an example where many businesses were caught off guard, not realizing that it's a special coverage. And then again, what are the odds of an earthquake versus a pandemic? Flooding is another example where it can be interpreted. And so many insurance agreements say that flooding is when it comes from above into the place. So let's say you have a basement and it comes through the window or the wells, etc. That's flooding. But it's not flooding if it comes up through the drain. So that's a whole different thing. So you might have water in the basement of your facility, and then the question is, did it come up through the drain, or did it come over from the ground down and flood the building? So those are two different views from an insurance company, and some they would reimburse, some they would not. And then there was the business interruption insurance. A number of businesses, there was an article in the Plain Dealer here, sued their insurance companies that they've been paying premiums for years, decades even, and this is the first time their business has been interrupted and they expected to be paid. They all lost, and because the insurance contracts, you either buy that type of insurance or you don't. And you either check that box or your insurance agent, put that into your policy. So just a couple examples where insurance coverage, it's worth talking to that professional based on what type of business you're doing, how you'd like to handle it, what you need coverage, what isn't worth covering, that kind of thing. All right. So I can ask Bob, are there any questions at this point before I wrap up?
I do have one. I have an LLC partnership created in 2021 that's never been used. I would like to convert it to a sole proprietary LLC due to the partner having other obligations and not being able to commit. Can I remove, hang on a second. Bear with me 1 second. It just skipped ahead. Can I remove the current partner, rename the LLC, or would I have to dissolve the current LLC and create a new one?
So it can be done in different ways. So there's, like they joke with the attorneys, it depends answer that gives you the fudge room. But you can, back to your operation agreement, did it say how a member leaves, how they get bought out, that kind of stuff, voting, can the one member vote the other member out, that kind of thing. So I've had situations like this where they dissolve the company and just start over. And then I have other ones where the other member says, yeah, I'm worried you're going to do something and I'm going to get liability. So I'm very happy to resign. So then you would do the documents where you redo the operating agreement and you have just one member. And so you now have the amended and restated operating agreement that reflects what you needed to say. But then there are other times where again, you just rewrite the operating agreement, how it's going to go. So do you want a new name, or are you just trying to avoid the liability of the old name? Who's going to run it? Who's got shares? Who put in what money to get it going? So there's a few ways to accomplish. If you can get that person to resign, it's a lot smoother. If they won't resign, you can dissolve the company. So it's important when you're doing your initial operating agreement that you have come up with a scenario, an answer to this scenario. And you say either member may resign, either member may, the company may be dissolved by agreement of the members, or do you say if one member wants, then the company will be dissolved and that other member can, start over again? Does one buy? Sometimes they'll buy the name from the other person, and then because they want to keep going. So there's no one answer to that question. It's a lot of what's the easiest way to accomplish what you want in the long run to have the business go forward. Will the guy resign? Will he not? Does he have to dissolve? That kind of thing. It's not expensive, like $99. I forget the amount to dissolve a LLC. So there's not a lot of expense. And then, $99 to refile a new one. So in Ohio. And you can do it in 5 minutes on a website with the Secretary of State. So it isn't a complicated, difficult, long thing to do the physical ending and starting a new one. Yet, is there assets, goodwill? Did you contribute something to get the LLC, the first one, going, that you would lose that thing that you gave to the company? So I'd say there's a number of scenarios that can happen based on what you want to accomplish.
Right. And so one more, a little bit of clarity. You answered a question that Leslie had posed before. She was a solopreneur with the digital business.
Yes.
So she said she meant someone who themselves is the sole owner and employee of their own service company that provides digital services to other companies, for instance, proofreading, social media, marketing, etc. What are some of the issues such digital-based single owner employee with a laptop company may encounter that are different than standard kind of storefront companies?
Right. So like using an attorney as an example, they're frequently paid for their advice and the time. And so there's been the jokes over the decades that, wait, you're going to charge me for a phone call. Well, then the attorney laughs, yes, that's what I do. You call me up and I answer your questions and you pay me to do it. But someone said, yeah, but really, we just talked on the phone for a few minutes. Really, I'm going to pay that bill. So what services are you offering? Back to sort of a error and omission insurance or a liability question. Are you giving good advice? What if they follow your advice and something bad happens? You give them say a software patch and it doesn't work, or it hurts their computer, things like that. So there still are liabilities in the company. What type of product? Are you doing it well? Are you doing it the way you contracted to do it? And so it is very important to have, as an example, again, like with the state of Ohio requires that law firms have a strong engagement letter with clients. So the client, and you have to say how much you're charging and what it is you're doing. And so I had a cousin who asked me to do his divorce, and I thought, no, I will not do your divorce, but I will help you sell your company. So you do an engagement letter and say, we will work with you and represent you in buying this company or selling this company, et cetera, whatever. Our rates per hour are, and then that person signs that and usually sends in a retainer to get the business going. So similarly with your services, you want to have a strong agreement, what it is that you're offering, what it is they're expecting from you, and then are you meeting those expectations? And so whether, again, it is advice or whether it's consulting, is there a product at the end? Some do a consulting report that they've contracted to present, and then the company, this isn't what I thought I was getting, this isn't what I paid for, that kind of thing. So there still are the liabilities of clarity as to what it is that you're providing, and did you provide what the client expected? So again, many understand the clarity from a brick and mortar type of place of the different things that can go wrong. But in digital, there still are, you have a product, and whether it's your advice or your computer work or your digital work, that kind of thing. And so somebody's buying it. Is it appropriate? Does it fulfill the contract that you entered into for the services you're going to provide?
Excellent answer. And I think that would apply to most service businesses as well.
Yes. And there are articles about how the pandemic has changed, and there are people who realize most of what I'm doing is computer oriented. I can get an Airbnb in Portugal for 2 months and do my work there. And I don't need to be brick and mortar, and I we can do everything we need to do electronically. So many clients said, I hired you as a consultant because I expect you to, come in and meet with our people. And, they were thinking in person, yet the consultant is thinking you can do it through Teams or Zoom, that kind of thing. So sometimes even nuances of how you give the service, you want to be clear in your expectations. Is it from Portugal or is it from Cleveland? The company may think of it as a very different way of presenting the services that doesn't meet their needs.
Great, excellent, thank you.
Okay, all right. So just wrap up with some takeaways here. Use professionals, especially a good attorney. Some people joke oxymoronic to say a good attorney, but also CPAs, insurance agents, realtors. It can make a big difference. Make your deals clear in writing. The more you nail down in writing, the better. The business structure, as we talked about, can make a big difference. Is there in limited liability is a real good example. Are you just an investor or are you actually responsible for the day-to-day? And then is there indemnification that you aren't going to be sued for your personal assets? But make the rules very clear. Having your operating agreement, code of regulations, bylaws, who's voting, who has authority. I had a situation where, one of the employees started writing himself checks and the other, what are you doing? Well, I'm coming in long hours. I'm putting in some overtime. I just thought I need to compensate myself. Like, yeah, that's not in our rules anywhere. Like, what? So the more you clarify that. Take employee matters seriously. A number of lawsuits with companies come from employee matters that the company might have thought weren't major issues, but end up being serious issues. Definitely have a clear succession plan. People do die, people do divorce, people do move to Florida, people do get midlife crises, all that kind of stuff. It helps a lot to have your succession plan. So make sure you have the needed insurance coverage and risks that might arise, make sure they're covered. Review indemnification. Does your company, if you get sued individually, many companies will indemnify you. They'll pay for the insurance defense, they'll pay for the attorney's fees, etc. So you want to analyze the indemnification being offered. So clear policies, clear procedures, know what your business is worth. That's a big mistake. I've heard a number of people, I heard that's expensive to get your business valued. Again, you laugh but if you didn't know, decisions are being made off a presumption of what you think it's worth, but how do you know? So also then get a handle on your data, protect it, limit the access to people that don't need to see it. And again, many splice their data into different categories of, HR is different than your trade secrets, is different than other pieces of the job, manuals on how to run a machine or something. So your data is important to analyze. Where it's being stored, is it backed up, and who has access to what. So with that, as I said, we're a law firm, we're in Avon. We always give a free phone call to give advice. Then if someone says, I would like to work with you, there's no fee until we send the engagement letter. We explain what it is we would do for you. We explain what our costs would be. And then we go off, with the engagement in hand to represent the client. So most law firms will give the free visit phone call to establish what it is that they need and what it is that firm can do for them. And then you want a clean, clear engagement letter so there's no confusion and the bill isn't what you didn't think it was going to be. So with that, I'll wrap it up unless there's any other questions.
So far, that's it. I think we're done.
All right. Very good.
Thank you. This has been really informative. Every time I sit in on these as a host, I learn a lot. So appreciate your insight here.
Sure.
So with that, everyone, if, join us for more workshops. Oh, there is one in the Q&A box I missed. No, it's yeah, I know you, Shanita. Oh, thank you. It's good to see you again. Shanita used to work in a store that I frequented all the time. Now I know exactly who you are. So thanks for saying so. Anyway, Listen, everybody, have a great rest of your day. Truex Law Group is an incredible organization. They do support SCORE. So, just by way of clarity, but all in all, they are excellent. So thank you so much for being here, and look forward to seeing you on other workshops. Take care now.